Welcome to another episode of the F.I.N.E podcast, where a couple of knuckle-dragging veterans unpack the world of mental health as unprofessionally and informally as possible. I am Eric Peterson, flying solo today as our co-host Bradley is out on a ski trip, and I'll talk about that in a few. And today's episode is about end-of-life care. We're going to give a little history on hospice care. I'm going to share my personal story with how I became familiar with hospice care. We're going to learn about what hospice care is and what it isn't, how it supports their patients and families in a myriad of ways, how hospice caregivers take care of themselves, and a lot more. And today, I'm going to have some help from my friends, the Executive Director of Uplifted Care, Fawn Hendershott, and Director of Community Relations and Development, Katie Canada. So sit back and relax and enjoy the journey as we do our best to take you from being freaked out, insecure, neurotic, and emotional to truly being fine about redefining hospice care.
Welcome to the I'm Fine podcast with your freaked out, insecure, neurotic, and emotional hosts, Eric Peterson and Brad Stozick.
Thank you guys for being here today. I really appreciate it.
Thank you for having us.
Yeah, absolutely. I'm sad that I couldn't have Brad here. He had the audacity, the selfish audacity, to go skiing with a bunch of other blind veterans. How dare him?
That's rude.
I was super rude. So he couldn't be here today, but he is here in spirit. He's doing really well. He actually found out about it. So there was an episode we had like a year or two ago. There was this guy named Lonnie Bedwell. He is a blind extreme athlete. Like he has climbed, I think, all 7 summits, all sorts of other crazy stuff. And like Brad knows him, and we reached out to him to be on our podcast, and he said he would do it. And he is like, I've never felt lazier in my life after talking to that guy. Like after hearing all the things that this guy does, much less like just alone, like as a human being, minus the fact that he's also completely blind, and he's still able to do that. So Brad's enjoying himself today, and I'm very happy that he gets to do something for himself. So, but this was a topic that I wanted to talk about for a while, because actually this ties into why I started this podcast with Brad in the first place. So Brad and I started this podcast because his father and my mother had both been diagnosed with terminal cancer, and we were both struggling, and we had our own stuff going on. And because of that, we found that doing this podcast and just talking about our stuff really helped us out a ton. So I really appreciate you guys being here. Before we begin, would you guys mind telling us just a little bit about yourselves and how you got started with Uplifted Care?
Sure. Go ahead.
Okay. So I actually started with Uplifted Care 10 years ago. This year it'll be 10 years.
Nice. Congrats.
Thanks. Yeah. It feels like 10 minutes. But yeah. So I was a nurse at the hospital doing acute care. That's the setting that I was in all the time. I was dead set that I was going to be a cardiac nurse through and through. And one of my friends actually started nursing at Uplifted Care and told me about her experience and was like, I know you, I know your personality, you would love it here. And not that I didn't love what I was doing, but she convinced me to just kind of take the step and try it out. So I interviewed, got a position as a nurse case manager in the field, and I just fell in love with it completely. She knew exactly what she was talking about.
Yeah.
It was just one of those things, I think, in hospice nursing, either you made the right decision or you didn't. It's not for everyone. But I fell in love with it. I knew that's exactly what I wanted to do. But I did experience a lot of things from my coworkers and my colleagues before leaving the hospital, of things like, oh, you're going to go be around death all day, or, that's not real nursing. And so there was a lot of that. But as soon as I came into the organization, not only the organization, but the field, I just loved it, knew that's what I wanted to do. So from there, I moved into a nurse team lead role after a few years. And then going on 3 years ago now, I got the executive director role. So
that's awesome.
Yeah.
And to your point, to take a role, to be working for any hospice organization, I truly feel like it takes an insane level of mental toughness, strength, courage, and like compassion to do that job. You know what I mean? Because like you said, and the only parallels I draw are like what I do over at the Veterans Home. I know it's definitely way more basic because I just go out there and visit and hang out and have a good time with them. But it's like when you're visiting these patients, you are building relationships, you're building friendships, like genuine friendships with them.
Yes.
Knowing in your mind where this is going.
Yes.
Right.
So to know that and still be like, yep, I'm going to do that is like a superhero level of like of character, in my opinion, which is just really, really cool. So thank you for sharing that. What about you, Katie?
So mine is a little bit different. When I was getting out of high school, I was going to go into nursing. I come from a line of nurses in my family. It was just kind of the next step. So then I worked as a CNA for a long time. I am officially a nursing school dropout. There's a lot of math. There's a lot of math, a lot of anatomy.
Yeah.
And then I actually got a job at a little newspaper, and that's where I kind of fell in love with marketing.
Nice.
So I'm like, oh, okay, let's maybe transition this, go for business. So I went to school and got a business marketing degree, which led to an internship at St. Mary's. So that turned into a job. And about 3 years into the job as a marketing coordinator at St. Mary's, the job that I'm currently in came available at that time, Hospice of Kankakee Valley. So I was like so ignorant. I'm like, oh my gosh, I've been in healthcare forever. Of course I know what hospice is. Of course I can do this.
Right.
So I remember vividly my first day, like going through all the orientation processes. And I'm sitting there like the whole time. I'm like, what? I didn't know anything about hospice.
Yeah.
What do you mean they can be on it for 6 months? Like, my gosh, somebody has to tell people about this. I don't think people know this.
Right. Yeah.
And they're like, well, that's kind of your job. So I'm like,
Perfect.
oh, okay, cool.
Yeah.
I guess I better like get my stuff together and learn about what I'm doing. And from there, it's just been, I mean, there's something to be said, like in the hospital, you're marketing to people where you're like, look at this new cardiologist that we have. Look at this new piece of equipment that's going to save your life. Look at all these fancy things that we have to bring you, state-of-the-art healthcare. There's definitely a transition to essentially marketing something that nobody wants. You know what I mean?
Yeah. Like nobody wants to talk about it. Nobody wants to accept it. You don't want to accept that a loved one is at the end of their life. So from that perspective, it sounds like a very difficult job.
It is very difficult, but it's also very rewarding. Don't get me wrong. There are times where I'm like, like figuring out the next flow from Progressive or Jake from State Farm would be a lot more fun than this. But it's definitely been, I mean, it is, like Fawn said, it's a calling. And when you're in it, like you are connecting with people at some of the most vulnerable times. And in my role, that's what's really kind of exciting for me is I had that aha moment, communicating with people in a way that they can understand it and not be so scared of something that's really scary is like the absolute most rewarding thing.
Well, I think one of the first times that we met was through a Korean War vet that you guys were doing a pinning ceremony. Mm-hmm. Was it a pinning ceremony, I think? And I remember hearing about it, and when I read the story about this Korean War vet and he was at the end of his life and he was going to be passing away soon and there was going to be this celebration essentially of life for him, I was like, I will absolutely go to that. Brought a few vets with me, and my mentality going into this was it's going to be super depressing because we're talking about the end of life. And I see the Korean War vet there and he's like smiling and having a great time. And I'm like, this is weird. Like I'm just trying to take it all in because it felt really good to be a part of that. It felt rewarding just to be a part of this moment because it's such a heavy moment for that person and that person's family. So it's really cool to be able to put a positive, like add some positivity to that. So I just thought that was amazing. So thank you for sharing that too. So before we get too much deeper into anything, I just want to share our sources for this episode, which are the National Institute of Health, Namaste Health, Cara Health, and the National Hospice and Palliative Care Organization. A few facts on hospice that I found because I was just curious and I love looking stuff up. The history of hospice can be traced back to medieval Europe and ancient civilizations. The word hospice comes from the Latin word hospice, which I appreciate because now I know how to speak Latin.
Yeah.
I say hospice. And that actually means guest or host. In medieval times, hospices were places of shelter for travelers, the sick, and the dying. And during the Crusades, hospices cared for ill travelers on long journeys. Dame Cicely Saunders, British nurse and social worker, established St. Christopher's Hospice in London in 1967, starting the modern hospice movement. And whenever you hear a female whose preface is Dame, I'm just like, that's so cool. Like, that lady has to be so cool.
She's like a superstar for us in the hospice world.
Oh, Cicely Saunders?
Oh, yeah.
That's awesome. Yeah. So she started the modern hospice movement. She believed that people should be able to die with dignity and without suffering. And the first hospice in the U.S. was established in New Haven, Connecticut, 1971. In 1983, which really wasn't that long ago, Congress made hospice a benefit of Medicare. And today, hospice care is provided in a variety of settings, including hospitals, nursing homes, patients' homes, and more. So, as I talked about before, and I've shared this story with you both, I've shared this with the employees of Uplifted Care, when the palliative care nurse, and I remember this moment like it was yesterday, I was at Edward Hospital standing by my mother's bedside. This palliative nurse comes in, young, looks like I don't know if I was her first patient, but if my mother was her first patient, but if I found that out, I wouldn't have been surprised, and she was nervous, and she had to tell me that my mom needed to go into hospice care. And my immediate feeling was anger. And this was something that I felt shame for and been embarrassed about ever since. But I was like so angry at her. I was like, how dare you? How dare you? And even though she did nothing wrong, she did her job. So it was so hard for me initially to accept that. I was like, you don't understand. My mom can beat this. My mom's beat cancer before. And then as time started going on, she was, the palliative care nurse was just unshakable. She was always there no matter what. She was always keeping us posted on things. And then when it got to the time that I realized she needed to be on hospice care, we initially thought she was going to have hospice care at the hospital and never be able to come home. And she has 2 granddaughters, and this was during the whole COVID thing. And so my kids couldn't go see her at the hospital. So I told the palliative care nurse that, and she worked, I'm sure, tirelessly to get the necessary equipment we needed so we could bring my mom home. And when she called me to tell me that, she was getting emotional about it because she knew why. That's how much she cared about her job. And so when I found out that we were going to be bringing her home, I walked out of my mom's room. I called you, Katie, and because I didn't know at that point, my mind was scrambled eggs. I didn't know where to go, what to do. I had no idea. And it was so terrifying. And I would draw parallels a little bit to when I got out of the military. You just get home and there's this whole big world and you're just I'm unfamiliar with all of this. What do I do? Where do I go? Who do I ask questions to? And I remembered that you worked for Uplifted Care because we worked together on things in the past. I called you. And we have a very friendly, laughing, sarcastic relationship. And I called you and you were just it was like I said a code word. And all of a sudden you just snapped to it. And you're like, okay, here's what we got to do. Blah, 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 blah. And then, my mom was on hospice care for, I think, 3 months, just about 3 months. And the value that I got across the board was just amazing because I benefited from not only did my mother benefit from the hospice care, I benefited from it. My daughters benefited from it. My wife and my dad, we all utilized the services that Uplifted Care provided, and it helped us through that process. And I remember, and I can't remember who it was, that social workers from Uplifted Care will check on the family during the whole thing, which is amazing. And I remember vividly, I was pulling up to the bank to make a deposit or something. And I got a call from the social worker, and my mother had been doing pretty good. Initially, they said, hey, your mom's probably got like a month at most. And we were on like a month and a half, 2 months. And this social worker told me, she was just like, listen, and she was incredible. And I can't remember who it was, but she was amazing. And she was just like, you're going to get hopeful at some point. You have to be very careful about that, because she was like walking me through how it goes, what to expect. And that is so important and valuable in and of itself, because sometimes when you're charting into the unknown, just having somebody that's been there, that's like letting you know, hey, just so you know, here's what you can expect, is like, right. Okay. Because now as I'm dealing with it, I'm like, wait, she told me about this. I got to be careful. Mm-hmm. And that helped me out mentally, because I don't know how I would have done if I didn't have that kind of support. And then all the way up through, my mom's passing, Uplifted Care was phenomenal. My dad, he's not a very outgoing guy. He's always just been pretty reserved and to himself. And the social workers were always checking in on him afterwards, getting him involved, making sure he was talking about things. They allowed my daughter to come in and talk to a specific social worker for young kids. And they were able to talk to my daughter about death, so she understood. And like, it was just amazing. So I really benefited. I really benefited in a lot of different ways. And that's why after that, when I was approached by Fawn, well, I think you called me about it first, and then I met with Fawn and mm-hmm. Kathy Boykin and talked about joining the board of Uplifted Care. And I've talked to Fawn about this before. I was hit with a lot of like imposter syndrome. I was like, what? Like, what do I do? What can I possibly give to this organization that does all of this great stuff? But I know that I can speak to it. I know I can gladly tell people how it positively affected my life, mm-hmm. And from that marketing perspective, it's a hell of a lot easier to market something when you know how amazing it is. You know what I mean? Because I'm just explaining to you how great this thing is. It's not like I'm trying to sell you something. Right. You know what I mean? So I can't thank you guys enough for letting me be a part of this organization. You know what I mean?
Well, we really appreciate all that you do. And and that's the part that's so important for me as the person that markets it. Like, I can tell you all day long what value it brings. I can tell you all day what we will provide. Your story carries so much more weight because you lived it. Mm-hmm. You're not in a paid position of telling people about it. It doesn't mean that I don't believe in it.
Of course.
But it carries more weight. It carries more weight.
Yeah. Mm-hmm. Yeah. No, I definitely agree, and I appreciate that very much. So would you guys mind explaining in your words, like, what hospice care is?
Mm-hmm. Well, and that's what I was going to add on to your story. I think your story just captures so much of what hospice care is, because we hear all the time still, I thought my mom had to have cancer, or I thought that hospice was for the very end. We're not at the very end yet. And your story shows everything that we're able to provide for the family, the anticipatory grief with your daughters, the full care with giving you the expectations, what to expect coming into this.
Oh, yeah.
It's not for the final days in order to qualify for hospice, like you said. Your disease progression, if it runs its normal course, your prognosis is 6 months or less. But that's not to say we haven't had people on for much longer, because we can truly only do so much to really think, when you are at that 6 months course, right. with our medical director. So a lot of times we get people in and we kind of wrap ourselves around them and take a look. It just takes that more eyes on the person and the family, and we're able to support them in such a way that a lot of times it helps them feel better for quite a while. Yeah. You get so much more out of it. So it's not for the final days. And I think that's something that we continue to try to scream from the rooftops.
Right.
Get us in sooner, because we have so much more that we can do. It's not giving up. Yeah. I think that's one of the biggest things, is people have that fear. But on the other side of it, just because you elect hospice doesn't mean that it's written in stone. Right. At any point you really could take us off of, take the services away. But I think if we just get in the home and we can show people what we do and that we're not scary, we don't come in and take all your medications away and then, your loved one passes the next day. I mean, of course, there's times where they may pass right after they sign up or in a couple of days, but it was going to happen whether or not we came in.
Right.
So we don't take all the medications away and give morphine and that's it. And unfortunately, we hear that until they pass and the families come in or call us and they say, oh my gosh, I wish I would have called you sooner. Yeah. So stories like yours are so impactful because like Katie said, we talk it all the time and we try to explain to people all the time. But unless you've experienced it, it's really hard to grasp that and understand that. And you don't want to accept it because no one wants their loved ones to die.
Right.
No one. But let us help you work through that, really. Right. Let us come to your home, take care of you in your own home setting. You're in the driver's seat. That's the other thing. We come in, we give you suggestions and recommendations, but you're in the driver's seat. You as the patient, you as the family. So however you want your journey to look, we will accommodate that as best as possible. Yeah. So that's the biggest thing.
Yeah. For sure. And that's one of the things that is so, when we talk about the sadness of the job, I think for me, that's one of the hardest things to hear is the people that come in. And when I started, I mean, the numbers are staggering. When I started in 2016, I want to say about 35% of our patients were dying within the first 7 days of admission. That number, like COVID was weird. COVID has made healthcare weird.
Right.
That number is at times during the month, 50% of our patients are dying within 7 days. And the saddest part about that is they don't get your experience.
Right.
We come in and we crisis manage those situations. We'll take them. We will take them. We will help get their pain under control but they don't get that full range of services to understand the value because it's that crisis situation.
Right. Mm-hmm. That makes a lot of sense because it's like you would get hospice care for your family member, especially if you loved or cared about them. But also if you love or care about them, you don't want to accept that they need it.
Exactly.
And that's the hardest thing.
We're all dying. Like there are very, very few things that we agree on today. Like very few.
Yeah.
The one shared experience that we have together is we are all going to be born and we are all going to die.
Right.
Normalizing that for us is the biggest hurdle because like you said, you shared some of the history of it. In relation to other medical practices, like hospice has only been around since the 80s. Like it's fairly new.
Yeah, I was surprised by that when I read that.
Yeah. So it's like catching on with the philosophy of hospice is still very behind, but we're all dying. Right. Like we're all going to experience death and loss. So how can we normalize that so that people want to talk about it more, so people are willing to accept the help when the time is appropriate, because that truly is the saddest thing for us to have those families come in to either, bring in a memorial donation or whatever it may be. Thank you so much. I wish I would have known to call you sooner.
Yeah.
So we could have had you longer.
Yeah, absolutely. And Fawn, were you going to say something?
I was just going to say, and sometimes it's those burdensome diagnoses like Alzheimer's, dementia, COPD, congestive heart failure. You're seeing incremental changes in your loved one. So it's not obvious to you that they're dying or that they're at a point where, wow, we could be at more of a time limitation right now.
Right.
Because you're with them all the time. So you're not necessarily seeing those declines. So, take a look at a holiday that was 6 months earlier in the year. What was your loved one like then? And what are they like
versus
now?
Today? Yeah.
That's a good point.
If you can see those differences, that's how we try to picture it. And even when we come in and talk to you about hospice, there's no need that you have to sign anything. We just try to meet you where you are, you know, and help the understanding, because that's what we found too. It's a scary conversation.
Oh my God.
Even for physicians, they're not, there's a lack of education in having these conversations.
Yeah.
They're very difficult conversations. Nobody wants to have them. So it's a team effort to go in and do that. And, like you were saying with it, you thought it was going to be this, kind of depressing situation when you went to that celebration of life.
Yeah.
And we get that, you know, people at Katie and I talk about this. You get asked, where do you work? And we say, for Uplifted Care. And, what is that? And we go hospice. Sad. And they do the head tilt, you know, that, that
really?
must be so sad.
Yes.
All the time.
That must be so hard.
Yeah. It's that head tilt.
Sad.
And we explain, you know, it is because of the nature of the work, but it's so rewarding. I've never felt like this is what I felt like I went to nursing school for. Like, I feel like, not that I didn't feel like I was making a difference before, but you feel it. Like you said, you get relationships with those families. You're a part of everything. And, you know, that's hard as a nurse too. And anyone working in the field is all of a sudden that care ends eventually. And then there's not that, you don't have that closure as much. So, you know, we kind of talk about that with our workers and dealing with what we have to deal with, but it is so rewarding.
Well, and you brought up you were talking about some misconceptions earlier. Would you mind talking a little bit more about any common misconceptions that people might have about hospice care?
How long do we have? There are no misconceptions.
Yeah, I'm sure.
Everybody gets it. Everybody gets it.
Yeah, totally understand.
Before we came to hospice, we didn't know the things. We had the same myths in our mind.
Yeah,
for sure. So there, and it's funny because when you're out and you're talking about it, like, I feel like there's really definite ebbs and flows between, like, sometimes it's like the same ones and you hear them over and over, and then all of a sudden you'll get a random one where you're like, wow, people really think that? You know, it's very, very confusing. But some of the big ones are the medications that we use. The comparison to we're euthanasia, you know, we're Dr. Kevorkian Jr.'s.
Just carrying bottles with a skull and crossbone.
Right.
So, and people, I make lighthearted jokes about this all the time just to kind of, again, normalize it. But I feel like even to pick up the phone to call us, I joke, like, we're not going to reach through the phone and grab you and hold you and not let you go. You know, I feel like people are nervous about that.
Because it's that mental game where you're like accepting what is happening right now. You know, that's hard.
Well, and are you making the right decision?
Yeah.
You have the best thoughts for who you're caring for.
Yes.
Yeah.
Paige, our director of social services, said this. I joked with her, I'm going to get that tattooed on my forearm. People are not afraid of hospice. They're afraid of dying. And she just said this to me within the last year. And I've done this work for this long. And I'm like, that is so profound.
Yeah.
They are not afraid of hospice. They are afraid of dying.
Right.
But all of the misconceptions that come with hospice kind of increase that fear and make our job so much more difficult.
Right.
It's definitely the medications. Like we'll just we just snow the person so that they go to sleep and they don't wake up.
Yeah.
Or we had one it was a couple months ago, the woman called for an unrelated reason and they were having a conversation with the front office and she said, "Oh my gosh, my daughter just died of kidney failure and I thought hospice was only for people with cancer." So she didn't call us because she didn't know that we treat any disease at the end of life, not just cancer. So that was one of those ones out of left field where you're like, wow, people really don't still understand what it is we do. Or they think you can't leave your house. They think one of early on in my career, one of the first, because that's my job, is to go out and like educate the community on what we do. I had someone reach out to me from my son's confirmation class and ask if I would come in and speak about death and dying to a bunch of preteens. When I tell you, I'm like, oh, yippee, that sounds like a great time.
Yeah.
I took so much from that. I use it in everybody that comes to my presentations is like, oh my gosh, here's the confirmation class story again. But it was so profound because those preteens gave me exactly, and they're preteens, so they're going to tell me, every adult thinks the same thing. Our egos just won't allow us to say it.
Yep.
So I asked them, I started out, I'm like, you know what? I'm going to gauge like their understanding of this. I'm like, what does death look like to you? And they were very animated. They're like, oh, it's those paddles in the clear and the flat line, and you're rushing around in the beds, and you've got doctors coming in and da-da-da. And I'm like, whoa, y'all watch way too much Grey's Anatomy.
Yeah.
But they described like a legit medical emergency, right?
Right.
Mm-hmm. And it's not to say, obviously, there are times when that's a thing. In, acute medical emergencies, accidents, things like that, that might be what it looks like.
Sure.
And then I asked them, what does it look like when a baby's born? Like their whole everything changed. And they're like, oh, it's pink or it's blue, and you're wrapped in a warm blanket, and the family's surrounding you, and it's loving. And I'm like, okay, so what if what you guys just described is what the dying process actually looks like? Because when it follows the natural course, that is what it has the potential to look like. And that is what we help happen. That is what we help give the families, is that loving experience of their loved one wrapped in a warm blanket, surrounded by people they love.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. There's, I don't know, a couple of worse ways to go than that. Like when you think about what you would want for yourself, I want to be surrounded by loved ones, as comfortable as possible. And like whenever I would walk into my parents' house, that's all that Uplifted Care was doing, was just making sure that my mom was as comfortable as possible and that my dad was as comfortable as possible. That comfort is the thing about it when you're dealing with death and dying, is that comfort is some of the only peace that you're going to get. Because it's not about getting, and we'll talk about grief in a little bit, but any peace you can get during that process is a godsend, any peace at all. So just the fact that I don't have to help, like when it came to, again, my mom, there was the nurse that would come by, and then there was volunteers that would come by to sit with my mother, and my dad was taking care of her, and my dad was getting burned out, because I can't imagine what it's like to be married, right? And have that relationship dynamic. And then all of a sudden now you are taking care of your partner 24/7.
Yeah.
That changes the entire dynamic of the relationship. I could see it. And so like I would try to give my dad breaks, but whenever the Uplifted Care team would come by, they would give my dad a break, and they'd be like, hey, go do whatever you want to go do. Go golf, do whatever. And like let my dad have a little peace.
Right.
Because that was the only comfort he was going to get at that time.
Right.
So it's so huge. It's really important. Could you both speak to the emotional and psychological support that's offered to both patients and their families?
Yeah, for sure. So like we said, this is not like a transactional decision, right? It's not which brand of toilet paper am I going to choose. It's not like that. So taking that into consideration and knowing this is truly a life-changing decision, that's where it starts. And understanding, we know what we know. I mean, we live it, and so we know it. How do we communicate it to people that have no knowledge of it? And that's where it really starts. Like, how do you dispel those misconceptions? How do you essentially make people okay with making this decision? And that's where the real care and compassion come in, to recognize their struggles and also give them all of the information that they need. It's one of those things where we just want to say, we swear it's going to be great. Just give us this opportunity.
Right.
But it's not something that we can kind of push to get them there.
Right.
But I think you really kind of spoke to it. Having the full holistic team is how it works, because we were able to come in and address all of those things. And I know Fawn can agree to this too. It's like 10% like medical clinical care.
Right.
And 90% holistic care of everybody. And that includes everything. They're managing their physical symptoms, managing, even people will say like, I had no idea how much paperwork was involved in all of this.
Big old binder.
Yeah. Yep. And like how they help navigate that on top of the emotional issues. It's navigating things like caregiver needs, like you said with your dad, having somebody recognizing his stress and his burden as being her primary caregiver. And hey, let's get you a volunteer in here.
Yep.
We had a woman, and this was a very profound statement. I think people always think of when a volunteer or someone comes in, then they can go and, get their hair done or whatever it may be. She's like, I don't want to leave my house. I just want to go sit and watch mind-numbing TV for a while. Can I go do that?
Whatever your thing is. Yeah.
So it's really holistically looking at them and saying, okay, what do we need to do to get the patient comfortable? We can do it with, all of these resources. What do we need to do to get the family comfortable? Are they experiencing things like anticipatory grief? Are they experiencing caregiver burnout? Are they experiencing, what can we do to make sure that this whole picture is the best that it possibly can be?
Exactly.
That's awesome. You have anything to add, Fawn?
Yeah, you hit it on right there with it is physical pain. Not everyone experiences pain, but it's so much emotional pain too. And so much of our jobs going into the home are support for the family as well.
Right.
We're supporting the patient, of course, getting them comfortable. But as you said, your dad's world got turned upside down. He was never a caregiver before.
Nope.
And a lot of times they don't even know how to caregive. So there's that fear of, oh my gosh, you're not here with us 24/7. I don't know how I can do this. So it's so much education and support to the families to make them confident and comfortable in caring for their loved one. And we're always there. But, of course, we have the nurses, we have the CNAs. Our social work team and our chaplain team are phenomenal with addressing those needs too. And like you said, when they made that phone call, there's so many things to expect, and we see it because we know, we live it, what's coming. So we just do our best to make sure that the families don't have surprises and they know what to expect, and they can be confident in caring for their loved ones. And I think we were talking about too with misconceptions and medications, and we come in and take them away. And it's not that our job is to come in and take away all those medications. It's that the point of those medications was to prevent you from getting where you are now. It's to prevent you from getting to the hospice point. So we know the physicians have drilled in that you have to take these medications, and that's true. But there are some that when we get to hospice, you're taking them for the bad side effects at this point because they're not doing any good. So it's just constant support. You don't come in and load all of this information on the families, and that's why we get in and it's bite-sized pieces, how you eat an elephant. So
yes,
it's just little by little. It's constant support.
Very good.
All of the time, yeah.
How else does hospice and uplifted care help families cope with the emotional journey?
In so many ways.
Yeah.
I mean, from the very beginning, like I said, it's kind of getting people familiar with it. But I think one of you touched on something. People think of the preteens, they think of death as a medical emergency.
Yeah.
So families often come into the situation and feel they don't have the confidence to provide the care, right? Like, well, I'm not a doctor. I'm not a nurse. I don't know how to do this. One of the biggest things that we do is teach. And I compare it to birth a lot. I mean, I had my first child when I was 20. I was in the hospital, I think, for 12 hours after birth. And they're like, here, go home and keep this whole human alive.
That's the weirdest feeling.
Right.
Yeah.
Zero training.
See you later.
Zero.
Good luck.
Okay.
We'll figure it out.
And I vividly remember a late night call with my grandpa one time. My grandma's cousin was on hospice care, and the wife had called her at 9:30 at night. She lived a couple blocks away, and she was like, I think Pete is dying. I think he's dying. What am I supposed to do? So my grandma went to kind of be with her, and my grandpa called me, the hospice person. He called me. He's like, what is Barb supposed to do? When are the hospice people coming? He was visibly panicking. And I'm like, Grandpa, they have given her everything that she needs. She is more than competent to handle this, get in bed with him, talk to him, hold his hand, help him in any way that she sees fit. She doesn't need medical knowledge or expertise to do this. She has everything she needs. So I think that our number one goal with the families is equipping them. Like if it's a medication administration, hey, we're going to make this really, really simple. Yeah. It's the same. It can be compared the same as administering medication to your newborn child.
Right,
you know,
right.
You don't have to be a nurse or a doctor to do that. We're not doing labs. We're not doing, medical treatments. It's medications to keep them comfortable. That's what you can provide them, and your love and support. That's all they need. That's all they need.
Mm-hmm. And to your point, like you were saying, he didn't know what to do in that moment. Had he been able to take advantage of some of the resources that are available, mm-hmm. you just would have been more, not necessarily comfortable, but you would have been more aware of like what's going to happen and how it's happening and everything like that. And I talked about this. I've talked to both of you about this before, but like for my daughter was 5 at the time, my oldest, and I have an MO. Whenever I got to tell anybody in my family terrible news, because like my wife has lost a few people in her family, and whenever that happens, the family will call me first to then tell my wife. Mm-hmm. And so I will take them. My MO is, if I got to deliver bad news, I will take you to Dairy Queen. I'll get you whatever you want. And we'll go to a really nice park, and we'll park. I'll park the car, and then I will tell you whatever devastating news I have to tell you. And so I did that with my oldest daughter, Lily. And like I said, she was 5, and I didn't know how she was going to understand it, but I knew that Uplifted Care had these resources for her. So I wanted to like talk to her about it first. And it was just a profound thing because, I told her what was going on, and she kind of like joked about it at first because she's 5 and she didn't get it. And then I watched my daughter grow up in front of my eyes because I saw her understand what was going on. And then she started crying, and then I started crying, and then we like talked about it. I was like, this is okay. This is how this is supposed to go. Like, you're okay. Here's what we're going to do. And now here's how we're going to move forward. I was like, I wanted you to know about this because I want you to understand when you're visiting her, I want you to understand how important this is. And I'm going to take you to a grief center where you're going to meet a social worker who's going to also talk to you about this a little bit too. And she dealt with it like in such an amazing way after that. We went to Uplifted Care. She met with the social worker. The social worker gave her this piece of clay to do an imprint of my mom's thumb on, which my daughter did with her, and a few other things with her. And it really created an opportunity for my daughter to bond with my mom during this time, and also having the understanding of how this all goes. And then afterwards, you're always so worried, especially as a parent, like, how am I screwing my kids up? Like, what am I doing that's messing my kids up? And so like, to this day, my daughter is almost 8. She'll talk about it. You know what I mean? And she's like, I feel like she talks about it in a super mature, healthy way. She's like, yeah, I really miss her. This is what happened and blah, blah, blah. And I'm so proud of how she understands it, because my experience with death really wasn't until like my teens. So for her to understand it like that, like, that's a lot of responsibility on an organization, and people don't understand that those resources are also available to help you, your grandfather, whoever, just understand what they're getting into emotionally, because it's so exhausting and draining.
For sure.
So what role would you say mental health plays in end-of-life care, and how do you ensure that patients' emotional needs are met alongside with their physical care?
So I feel like for everybody across the board, like there's a lot of aspects of control, right? Like even when you were talking about your daughter, like, we feel safe when we're in control.
Yeah.
I can't think of anything that's more unsafe or out of control than death. Because it's like also the one greatest unknown.
Yep.
So the things that you described for her, like getting the clay, doing the thumbprint, that's one of our biggest things that we try to tell our families, to teach our families, to carry through for grief support. We try to help you find control in a situation that is completely out of control.
Right.
We can't fix this.
Right.
We can't stop the death. We can't make the death not happen. These are the things that we can do to give you some of that control back. It's that fingerprint that she's going to be able to have forever. For us as an organization, we do like our complementary therapies. So we have our music therapy, our massage therapy, pet therapy. Music therapy does this really beautiful thing. Our music therapist, Megan, does Sounds of the Heart, which she goes in and she meets with the families and they choose a song together. Our goal is to hopefully have the patient be able to have, be involved in that conversation too and choose a song for their loved one. She records their heartbeat and then she sets that as the beat of the music to the song that they choose. So we can't control the death.
And then she gives that to them.
She gives that to them for them to put in a bear or whatever they want to do. But that's giving them back a piece of that control. It's getting them out of, maybe they're in a hospital setting. And I know we did an interview with a family that had their loved one in the hospital during COVID, and there were 9 kids. And they had, could have one visitor at a time. Their dad was super social. He was a barber and then a volunteer, and he loved people. They were able to bring him home. They brought him home. They put a hospital bed in his living room, and they invited over 80 of their closest friends.
Hell yeah.
They had like a living wake. And when talking to them, they're like, I can't even tell you, like, of course it's sad, but like toasting with 80 of our closest friends and families to a life beautifully lived for over 90 years, like there's something about that. It was giving them back control. They had no control in the hospital. They had one person, plate glass, masks, gowns, all of the things.
So it's not personal.
No.
Sometimes.
Right.
No.
Right.
So bringing him home and allowing him to be in his environment gave him back control as the person. Gave the family control to do whatever the heck they wanted. Our goal is to help give you a piece of that control back when you feel so like you're spiraling. You're spiraling into the unknown.
Yeah.
Do you have anything to add?
Yeah, that's that when we go into the homes, and home being wherever the patient calls home and family call home, whether it's home, facility, sometimes it is hospital where we're caring, but we try to address what is your personal goal? What is the patient's personal goal? What would this look like? What's one thing if you could do before that time comes? What can we help you do? We had someone who he just wanted to get in a car and go drive and look at the cornfields, but it was hard because of his limitations with walking
the things we take for granted.
Exactly.
Yes.
Exactly. And it just the sense of relief on his face, and the family has that memory now forever. So that, again, the sense of control, what do you want this to look like? And it helps with that coping and kind of helps take your mind off the fact that you're dying in front of my eyes and we're celebrating the time that we have left and we're enjoying every moment and I'm going to remember this forever. That's really, really helpful for the family.
Yeah. One of my best childhood friends, he knew his father had received a terminal diagnosis. And before he passed, he was still healthy, fairly healthy. And they took a trip across the country together. And I always tell him, I'm like, man, I am so thankful you got that, because that is, I think, what everybody wants with their loved one. They want one more hurrah, one last trip, one last something. But man, you don't always get that. And so what else can you do other than control what you can control? Have these types of moments like the thumbprint working, you just want to drive and see the cornfields again. Like that's that. You can still have that. You can create that, or you can work with an organization that can help give that to your loved one. And again, like you said, it might be the only piece you're going to get out of this. Yes. There's no way around it. It sucks. It's one of the worst experiences you're going to go through.
Absolutely.
So why would you not want any bit of comfort and peace that you can get that is at least productive and constructive?
Right.
You know what I mean? Something that's going to benefit the family members that are going to be living through this. You know what I mean? So those are really good points. Are there any specific mental health challenges that you think are unique to veterans in hospice care? And if so, how does your team address those?
Ooh, absolutely.
Yes.
Absolutely. So when and I've shared this with you lots of times, my kind of introduction to the veterans program. So I don't have a strong veteran background. Like 90% of the things that I've learned about veterans have come from you. So.
Nice. I'm sorry.
Congratulations.
Job well done.
Yeah.
But when I started in 2016, they were starting in this We Honor Veterans program through our National Hospice and Palliative Care organization. So again, I have a lot of ignorance in the beginning, but I'm very willing to share it. But I ignorantly was like, oh, okay, I feel like veterans is something that we can all agree on. Maybe we should look further into this. We probably care for about 50 veterans a year, right? We ran the numbers. It was like 333 out of 1,200. So, so that kind of elevated it to the top of like a priority list. It's like, we need to like really dig into this and see what it's about. So it is, like I said, the We Honor Veterans program through our National Hospice and Palliative Care organization. And what they do is they really put an emphasis on the issues that veterans face at the end of life. And this, from the very beginning, it's very transparent. We are not lumping all veterans into a category.
Right.
But through studies, it is significant that that veterans experience things differently emotionally at the end of life than civilians.
Really?
So, yes.
That's interesting.
And where it started kind of with World War II, Korea, what we would personally see in the field is, 18, 19-year-olds were drafted for World War II or for Korea. They go to war. They come home. The mental health resources were really great when they returned, right?
Yeah. Put these things on your head. We're going to zap you.
Yes.
Right.
Yep.
But it was really like, pull yourself up by your bootstraps.
Yeah.
Go get a wife, or a husband, get a job, go move on with your life. And they did that. And they took whatever happened there and they compartmentalized it in the very furthest part.
What could go wrong?
Right. Nothing.
Yep.
I mean, especially when you're like receiving a terminal diagnosis, it's like, that's just going to stay back there. It's never.
Yeah.
And
I didn't do bad things.
Right.
It'll all be fine.
Yeah.
And what we would see is it would slowly start creeping up. And there are several examples of this. And it's not all like happy stories. It's not, there's a lot of pain and trauma. And again, we're not lumping anybody. We've got, we've had some that are like, I did this and I'm proud of it. And I'm so excited.
Great experience.
Yeah.
Yep.
And the one that really, there's a couple that really stand out for me, but the one gentleman, I mean, very somber, very quiet, soft-spoken gentleman, served in World War II, came home, started his own business, got married, had 4 kids. He was like a deacon in his church. He was, all of these things in the community. He received that terminal diagnosis and he started acting out in ways that our staff had never seen, like calling his wife names and being combative with the staff and, all of these things.
Wow.
So having the awareness through like the education from the We Honor Veterans program, one of our CNAs finally was like, hey man, what is going on? And his was spiritual. He's like, I want my wife out of here. I'm never going to see her again. I'm going to hell for what I did. I'm never going to see her again. I want to cut ties with her now.
Yes.
So that I don't have to cause myself pain when I burn in hell.
Her.
Yeah.
Oh my God.
Yeah. So what that allowed us to do was then bring in the social work team, bring in the chaplain. Dan, our chaplain, who is also a veteran.
Yep.
He was able to come in and talk to him And his big argument was, it's against the commandments to kill. And he ended up sharing horrible stories of the pain that he went through that up until this moment, not a single person had heard those stories. Yep. And kind of on the flip side, same CNA, we had a lot of really good experiences, very aware of these things. One of the things that we do, a couple of the things that we do for veterans are pinning and recognition ceremonies. And then we also do a ceremonial flag draping at the death. So this isn't like the actual VA ceremony. This is just our way of honoring them as like the final act of honor. We instruct the funeral homes and the staff, if they're in a facility, to, do like an honor walk of sorts if they would like. Those pins are literally worth so much more than the material that they're made of, because they see them maybe as just a little token or whatever. They have opened up so many conversations that may not have happened in any other instance. Yeah. So in this particular instance with a woman, she was a World War II vet. She was a naval nurse. She volunteered. She went over, did her service. She came back home, had 5 children. She was tough old girl. Her vocabulary matched mine. Nice. I mean, she was rough. She was a bartender by trade. Like she was, So as she was nearing the end of life, that CNA was doing a visit, was talking to her about, wanting to offer her a pinning ceremony, and she got very verbal, very upset. Get that flag away from me. I hate this country. Hate it.
Yeah.
So through his training, he kind of, started to approach the situation and was like, was that where you met your first husband? And she said, no, that's where those fuckers raped me repeatedly.
Oh, man.
And nobody did anything about it. She didn't tell her children she was a veteran. She didn't tell anybody. She felt so much shame.
Yeah.
And so again, it was coordinating that team. She was of the Catholic faith. She felt like she deserved what happened to her. And she felt like she was also going to hell because she had never confessed her sins that happened to her in the military. And when you think about it, harboring that burden changed the entire trajectory of her life.
Oh my God. Absolutely.
And so being there's like such an honor, and again, like imposter syndrome, like I don't feel worthy to be in this position with you. You know what I mean? Sure, but they were able to put the team together. They were able to get social work in there. They got a priest in there to allow her to confess, to bring peace at the end of life. And she was able to die not harboring that horrific secret anymore.
And had the team not known what the signs were, what to look for, you have to imagine how that would have affected her mental health in her last days. But because she was able to like get it out, to talk about it, to just purge however many years of stuff they've been holding in the back of their heads out before their last day, again, from a peace and comfort perspective, what more could you possibly do for somebody?
For sure.
Exactly.
And that extends to the family also. We had one other really positive, you spoke earlier about the Korean War. I knew nothing. Like my level of ignorance coming in this was insane. I had no idea the Korean War was the forgotten war. But we met with a family after the death of her father, and he was on for over a year, right? Yeah. And they never knew anything about his military service, his kids.
Yeah.
Which is so common.
Right?
For real.
Super common.
We came in to do a pinning ceremony, and he was like annoyed. He's like, what do you want to pin me for now? Nobody cared then.
Right.
He died the proudest veteran. She said, she's like, I would not have had. So that's why I say they're worth so much more than the material they're made of, because by extending that pinning, it opened up a whole arsenal of stories that his kids never knew.
Yeah.
She said for his final Christmas, they gave him an Army medallion that he displayed on his mantle with such pride.
Yeah.
And one of his dying wishes was to have his dress blue uniform that nobody even knew was in the home donated to a museum. She's like, we were able to have those memories and those stories of my dad because of that stinking pinning survey, a pinning he didn't even want opened the floodgates of experiences for that family.
When you have a lot of vets like Korean War and Vietnam especially, and they don't want to share, they don't want to talk about whatever happened to them. They have every right to share or not share.
Yes.
But like to give them that opportunity to have those conversations so their family gets to hear those stories and understand. Like my grandfather passed away as a World War II pilot, and he passed away when I was young, when I was a teenager, and I never got the chance to like talk to him and ask him about those stories. And I was young and naive at the time, but like I wish, my family wishes that we could have talked to him a little bit more and got a little bit more of those stories, that he would have felt a little bit more comfortable. Yeah. And again, on the We Honor Veterans side, some of the veterans, some of the people that are a part of your organization, like you mentioned, Chaplain Dan Horton, who's an amazing man, is also a veteran. And it's going to put that person at ease a little bit too, to know that they're talking to another veteran also. So, I mean, I think that's a crucial part of it.
Exactly. It helped me so much in the field, just gaining that education, because at the time I was at the Illinois Veterans Home caring for those patients. We have such a great relationship with them.
Yeah.
But knowing, depending on which war they served in, they may display different behaviors depending on if they were celebrated when they came home, or if they were spit on when they came home.
In Vietnam. Vietnam has created a whole different.
Yeah. So it helped to work in collaboration, and learning that education helped me better care for them and know what to expect, as they decline as well, because when it gets to the point where they cannot verbalize things too, that's where you saw a lot of behaviors as well. So instead of, it coming into it, not knowing that education, we could be like, oh, no, it's just terminal restlessness for no reason.
Oh, they're in pain. They're in pain. Let's give them a pain medication.
Right.
But it allows you to come to that understanding and treat them better.
Yeah.
Yeah.
That's awesome. Yeah. And a lot of Vietnam vets too. Like I know a lot of Vietnam veterans that never received a thing from the VA, don't want to receive anything from the VA. We work in collaboration together between Uplifted Care, Project Headspace and Timing, the VAC, and we do a Vets Cafe on Fridays. We have Vietnam veterans that come in there now, and one of them came for like 6 months, never said a word, and then he started opening up. So he's in there, and then this other brand new Vietnam veteran's in there who had never come to any of our events before, never received a dime from the VA, started doing it like a month prior. And the second they started talking and they realized that they were both Vietnam vets, they realized that they were both there around the same time and weren't very far from each other. And then they started sharing stories. So at this point, that first vet had been coming in for about a year, and he would be pretty short and sweet, share a little bit, not too crazy. He was still pretty reserved. But when those stories started coming out, and they started sharing like everything. And I found out in that moment that both of them had been shot. I didn't know any of that. Like they were just going, and everybody else, all the other veterans in the room were just shut. We were just quiet, just listening to them talk, because it wasn't until they found somebody else that understood their situation for them to feel comfortable enough to start talking about it. And that is just like, and to be able to get to be a fly on the wall that gets to watch that, you see the visible comfort. Like you see them initially tense, and then they start getting more relaxed and comfortable because they're talking about whatever it was that was keeping them so tense for so long. So again, like the mental health like value in that is just it's insane. It's amazing. So it's such a cool program that you guys have, and it's something that I love to be a part of too. But so the stages of grief and emotions, talk about that super quick. So we've done episodes on the 5 stages of grief before. Again, as a reminder, that's denial, anger, bargaining, depression, and acceptance. The biggest misconception with that is that it's a linear process. It is definitely not a linear process. You are a bouncy ball, and you're just kind of bouncing between all of those stages of grief at all points in time, in my opinion. What do you guys think are some of the most common emotional responses from families when they enter the hospice journey?
Well, and I know that you mentioned that you feel shame for it. Anger. is huge.
Oh my God. Yeah.
Which you should not feel.
Right. I understand. But, yes,
but it's understandable.
Yeah.
100%. And walking in as a hospice clinician, it's not about you. It's about the situation right now. There's so many different family dynamics and things like that. And everyone is processing it differently. But 100% all of those emotions just constantly. And it depends on the day and the situation. But fear of the unknown is huge. Yeah. Huge. What are they going to expect? Are they going to be able to adequately care for their loved one? That's huge. The imposter syndrome. But a lot of anger, and we see that a lot of times, whether it's patients or families, and then the denial. So sometimes when we meet with someone, they may be accepting of their illness or their condition, but their loved one is not.
Oh, yeah.
Which is huge, and it's totally understandable.
Sure.
100%.
Yep.
But that's where, we can come in and we can help work through that as well. But they don't understand, and they want mom to keep fighting or dad to keep fighting. And again, it's not that you're not fighting. It's just a different perspective of it. So, I think those are some huge emotions in the beginning. Great big emotions. Never little tiny emotions. Right. It's huge. It's the most vulnerable, most difficult thing you will ever have to deal with in your life. You know, when death is quick, it's very, very difficult after, because you don't have that sense of all the things that we could have done and all the things we could have said.
Right.
But when death is gradual, it's so difficult and so draining, and it's just a whole different outlook in how you perceive everything and how you react to everything and manage those big emotions.
Brad and I have talked about that because Brad's father, I believe, passed relatively quickly from the onset of the diagnosis. And then my mom was, like I said, like 3 months or so. And him and I talked about it a lot, like what's better, what's worse, if it's quick or if it takes a while. And the truth is they both suck. Yes. They're both terrible. They're both terrible for different reasons. But like, it's so hard to deal with that and to watch that progression. But what I will say is that with my mother, when I found out and I accepted what was happening, I said to myself in that moment, from here on out, I can't regret anything. I can't, because when the day comes, I don't want to say to myself, I could have done more. Right. That's the biggest dagger to the heart, is when you say to yourself, I could have done more, because you're digging yourself a hole that you're just going to keep digging forever. Right. So like at that moment, I knew every day. And I was working 2 jobs at the time and doing all the other things, wife, kids, every single day. I was like, I'm going to go see my mom. I'm going to go up there. I would go up to her at Edward Hospital, and then I would come home, and it would be late at night. And then sometimes I was like, you know what? I am not that tired. And I would turn around and go get my book bag, pack it, go back up there and just hang out with her for however long. And I was like completely tapped out, exhausted. But I kept saying to myself, when the day comes, I'm not going to say that to myself. Right. I have to control what I can control, and that's what you guys are talking about. And that's so important to give you that peace, because after the fact, shame and embarrassment and guilt are, in my opinion, some of the most destructive feelings a person can have, because it's a little seed that gets planted and then it just grows. And so by controlling what you can control, I think is the best way to mitigate that. So I think that's really important. What advice do you have for people who struggle with unresolved trauma or guilt related to their loved ones or for their family members? Like, what advice or support would you have for those people?
So I think like managing expectations is a huge thing for us. Like we really do that well with our families. But I think one of the things that we need to talk about that needs to be more normalized. So there are a lot of families that are holding on, like in your situation, great love for your mother. You want to do everything you can to be there for her. There are a lot of those situations where the person that is dying did not have a good relationship with their family. You know what I mean? There are a lot of things. So I follow a lot of hospice creators on TikTok. It's like my greatest little pleasure.
Yeah.
And they talk about that a lot, where they're like, I have a lot of patients where their dying wish is just to see that daughter or see that son that they've, it's not just because the person is dying does not mean that the person that has left that family situation for a trauma or a boundary or whatever it is, just because a person is dying does not mean that they have to forget that everything happened and come back in their lives,
right.
And so that really goes into like managing those expectations from a social work perspective, or an emotional perspective. It's educating them like, hey, we completely respect where you're at and respect the boundaries that you've set. We just want you to know, these are some of the things that you might feel if you choose to continue this distance or whatever it is.
Yeah.
But I mean, that's the big thing. Not every situation is a loving, happy situation. And we're well equipped to manage.
Yeah.
The dynamics are wild, man.
Yeah.
The dynamics are wild.
Yeah.
When people are dying, you have, the family members that come out of the woodwork or, it's helping manage expectations for everyone.
It's controlled chaos.
Yeah. And it's not always this beautiful family situation, but we talk about that too. If you are in a situation and things haven't been good, talk about that, like use this. If you need that to heal, to get out some of this unresolved stuff.
Yeah.
This is the time to do that.
Yeah.
So, I mean, those are some of the things that we provide our families too. It's not always the loving that's the only experience.
I didn't think about that.
And sometimes a lot of those things come up after the fact, when our counselors have reached out to the family, after some time has passed about grief counseling, and they decide eventually to join with grief counseling. A lot of that stuff comes out then too.
Yeah. I'm sure.
Yeah.
And how do you guys think families can maintain a sense of connection with their loved ones during their final days, even when communication becomes difficult?
So that's one of the biggest questions I would get when I was in the field is, do you think they can still hear me?
Yeah.
And what we've always been trained is that hearing is the last sense to go. So, and sometimes it's more comfortable for people to have that conversation with their loved one when they can't say anything back.
Right.
There's been things that it's been on their mind, or they want to ask for forgiveness for something, or whatever the case may be. But just talk to them, if we truly believe that hearing is the last sense to go, they can hear you. Tell them anything that you want to get off of your chest, tell them. Just sit with them. Like Katie said before, get in the bed, lay with them if you want. A spouse wants to get in the bed. We do not discourage that in any way. It's not that sterile environment that you're going to hurt something, or, you can't hop up in there and
put the dog on the bed. Like you can,
whatever you want.
If they want a glass of whiskey, give them a glass of whiskey, but allow them to die the way that they lived. We have people that say all the time, like, we don't want, like, we're chaotic. We don't want like Mozart playing. Play the freaking Rob Zombie then. Like it is
your life.
Yes.
Exactly. Dignity.
Yes.
And to die with dignity is to die your way.
Yes.
So huge. I think that's amazing. That's really important. Now, so we talked about obviously the profound nature of the work that you both do. How do caregivers and hospice workers manage their own mental well-being?
That's definitely something that's heavy. That, it's like that honeymoon phase. You come in, you love your job, you love what you're doing, you feel so fulfilled and rewarded, and you don't realize throughout your time that things are affecting you the way that they are.
Yeah.
Like I had mentioned earlier, I vividly remember I had someone that came onto service and she was awake and in her recliner at my first visit, smoking a cigarette. We had just admitted her, and I laughed because she's like, this is exactly how I want to go, as she's smoking her cigarette in her recliner. And I chuckled. Fully functional, able to have a conversation. And the next day she died. And we always make a condolence call to our families that, to tell them if we're not there, to give them our condolences. And the sense of no closure for me, to be able to see her. It was one of my first experiences with my patient dying coming into hospice. And the daughter had said, she died how she wanted to, smoking a cigarette, which was great. But eventually those things do get to you. You are never just used to death being in hospice. It's not just, yes, we know that's the expectation of where we're going to go in 98% of our patients, but you never just get over it or get used to it. And especially when you have those people that you can relate to. I've had young mothers with young children that I can relate to, and you kind of see yourself there. And with the situation earlier with the husband getting angry with the wife because he was trying to kind of disconnect from everything to protect her. I've seen that with mothers disconnecting themselves from their children to try to protect them. So then you have that sense too, like, how could you do that? I would want to spend every single minute with them and make sure they know. But again, to protect, and that's not, everyone's experience is different and we can't change that. But then how do you deal with that internally? So we recognize that huge as an organization, and we really try to make sure that we have not only mental health resources available, but specific group counseling, because sometimes it helps to talk it out with other people. Some people don't necessarily adapt that way. So we do try to have fun. So whenever we have, different events or Christmas parties or thing, we try to
be really ignorant,
light and things like that.
You got to have a sense of humor.
Exactly.
To work in this, in that industry, in my opinion.
So huge support. I think the biggest support that I had when that happened to me with my supervisors is they understood where I was coming from. And so, take the rest of the day off. I know this was a really difficult death for you. So just to recognize those things and you can see different behaviors in someone, and you can tell when something's affecting someone big time. So sometimes you have to seek those out. Not everyone's going to talk about it. So recognizing that with your team and making sure you're supporting your team and then supporting each other and just giving them as much resources as they can to help manage and deal with it.
And I think it seems from my interactions and just being around Uplifted Care, it seems like a lot of the employees that I've met and talked with have like a very genuine relationship with other people within the organization, which wasn't like when I first got back from deploying and all that other stuff. My first office job was like the worst job ever. And I was like sitting there and I hated it. I couldn't like be myself. I couldn't say anything. It just felt weird. And I felt super disingenuous. I didn't feel authentic in myself. And I always think that's a really big cause of like depression and anger and things is when you don't feel authentic in who you are. Right. And like, it seems like everybody, like a lot of the people that I've talked to feel very authentic and like comfortable hanging out, talking with the other employees. And in my opinion, because I was thinking about this, is like you're trauma bonding like every day.
Yes.
Like every day.
That's exactly what I was going to say.
Like you're going through stuff. And again, and I draw parallels to the military because that's how it feels with a lot of the guys that I deployed with. We trauma bonded all the time. So if I see him and it's been a decade since I've seen him, it's like I saw him yesterday. Because we accept each other. We've been through things together. And that's very hard. But to have that support is everything. And, and part of what makes it, I think, probably easier to deal with, a little bit easier to deal with.
Exactly. The team camaraderie is huge. You see that bonding all the time because you're going into it together. You go from doing everything you can to save someone. That's what you learn in healthcare. How do you save someone? To doing everything you can to making sure their final days are peaceful, dignified, comfortable. So we see that even when we have new employees come in, the people that are training them are taking them under their wings and their support and saying, listen, if you need anything, you call me. You can call me at any time because you're scattered. You're not all in the same vicinity because you're visiting a home patient and this person's at a facility. But there's that there's that unspoken connection, I think, with the group that is just, you have your people, and it's that trauma bond, but you just do, you have your people that you can just be real with and talk with.
Yeah.
Take that time.
And morale's huge.
Oh, yeah.
Super important anywhere, especially in the industry that you guys work in, I think.
And the comparison to like the guys that you deployed with, I think is a really great comparison. Like the dark humor that we have with each other, the sarcasm, the tongue-in-cheek ways of getting through the day in a really tough situation. Well,
how else are you supposed to get through it? Are you going to compartmentalize it like that veteran and just never ever talk about it again? And to bring up something that makes you feel vulnerable, especially around other people, they might not be ready to have that profound conversation with you. So if they don't take it the way that you intend them to take it, the conversation's going to go south and you're going to isolate even further. So again, that's why my belief has always been humor is the best way to deal with all of that stuff, because you're bringing it up in such a way that's making it a little lighthearted, that's going to like make other people laugh. But also, I always feel like it's very easy to traverse between emotions. So like if we're laughing, having a great conversation, I think it's easier to go into a now serious conversation on something I'm dealing with and I'm struggling with than it would be if we were just not laughing or talking. It was just kind of awkward. And then I'm telling you about this super deep, hard thing I'm dealing with. So, I mean, I think that leads to overall better morale, overall better communication, and then it helps the organization as a whole anywhere. Because like military, that's the sense of humor, the dark sense of humor is like everything. You know what I mean? Because otherwise, how else are you going to deal with it? Like one of the guys that I'd met with forever ago, he came into our organization for a little while and then left. He just constantly isolating himself, had a very hard time. He was very, very reserved, very stoic. And him and I had a conversation one day, and the reason why was because on his base overseas, at night, typically, depending on your situation, you would have to go into a tower and pull security for the night, making sure that everything's good, and everybody took a turn. And his tower was blown up, shot up, holes everywhere, everything. And he told me every day I had to get in there, I had to tell myself I was worthless. Because if I was worth anything, why would I do something like that? Why would I go there? And so it's like, that's what happens if you don't make jokes out of things. You have that mentality, and that's not sustainable. And eventually it's going to hurt you, I think.
Self-destructing.
Yeah. So it's like you have to try to, I think, make jokes out of those situations if you can.
And one of the heaviest, and I hate to bring this time up again, but during COVID, with families not being able to go see their loved ones in facilities.
Oh, yeah.
During their final days, and our staff being the only connection for them, just an additional burden on heavy. There to help.
That would be insanely heavy.
For sure.
Now, how does working in hospice and working for Uplifted Care change the way you both personally view life, death, and grief? You swallowed in thought for a second.
Did. I mean, I say this all the time, like, it doesn't make me any less human, right? Like Fawn shared about, that connection when you have with somebody who's like your age or has kids your age, you are trying to fight the urge to not question every lump and every mole and, become a raging hypochondriac.
Right.
Yes.
But on the flip side of that, and I try to be very vulnerable and very transparent, because while I am out here shouting this from the rooftops, like I throw my poor grandma under the bus all the time. Like, she is my person. And if I were in believing wholeheartedly in what I do, if I was in like an oncologist office with her and they said, we're sorry, there's nothing else we can do, I would have a really hard time not being like, you bet your ass there is.
Right. Yeah.
Like,
figure it out.
Yeah. Figure it out, because I'm not ready to lose her. So I say that with such great vulnerability to say, I'm not taking the human component out of this just because I'm so flamboyantly marketing what we do and the benefits of it doesn't mean that I'm cold to it.
Right.
Like,
absolutely. Yeah.
So in my personal life, minus like, I'm still scared of death. I'm scared of my own death.
Right.
I'm scared of my loved ones dying.
Of course.
I just know there is a better way for us to do that when the time comes. It doesn't mean I want it to happen,
right?
But I just know that there's a better way.
Yeah.
Well, I think appreciation for that knowledge and the experience and being a part of something that is so difficult to fulfill in the community, but that you are a part of it. And like Katie said, questioning every cough and
right. I didn't even think about
abnormality that you have, and seeing the things that could happen, because we hear the stories of, I went to 10 different appointments before this was found, and it happens because nobody knows everything.
Right.
But then questioning yourself. And on the humorous side of it, I know Katie and I have joked about it. Our kids are like, my mom works with death all the time, with dying people, bringing our kids into it. And now they're a little bit more open. And like you said with your daughters, like comfortable with talking about death. Whereas, it might be quite an awkward situation, but so,
But also the appreciation factor too, and I don't remember if we were recording or not. But I mentioned earlier, when I was a private investigator, I used to investigate high value disability claims, and so these were people that were like the alphas, like medical directors, judges, board members of organizations, very big organizations. And they'd worked their entire lives, saved up because they thought that this was what life was going to be. They worked their entire lives because they were like, okay, when I retire, I'm going to go to Florida. I'm going to do this. I'm going to do that. And then this insanely heavy thing, life-changing thing happens to them, and it completely changes their path. And in that moment, and talking with some of these people that were confronted with that life change, I realized how much I have to appreciate driving and looking at cornfields.
Right.
Like that's what that one guy wanted to do. Like, whoa.
It does help you appreciate
everything. Because again, you control what you can control. And I think that's also what gives you such a profound acceptance is by working in your field and doing that every day and working around these people. You know what life is because you know what death is. And I think that is that sense of worth, honestly, is something that I think a lot of people are actually looking for with their jobs that might not offer such a deep sense of worth, but it comes with a price, obviously. You know what I mean? So at least I'm very glad that it's given you some good lessons out of it. How have you found that working in hospice has changed your perspective on mental health and self-care? And if so, how? That was a way deeper side than the last question.
I mean, 100%. It is such an emotionally draining field, but it's also such has the power to emotionally connect to. And I think one of the biggest realizations for me is caregiver stress. You know what I mean? Like seeing it from the perspective, I mean, my parents are in their mid 50s. You know, my caregiving has been limited to my children. But you think about that, and you think about things like when you go to work, your children go to daycare. That's huge for the population of people that are caring for elders, that are caring for their parents, that are caring for, their loved ones, because it's not as recognized to send your parent to daycare. Right, you know what I mean? So there's a lot more emotional things with that caregiving aspect that I realized until working in this, I think. And that kind of ties into self-care, because the example you gave of your dad, he assumed that role and his time to himself went out the window. And I feel like it's truly a different level of care than caring for your kids.
You think you know what love is until you watch a spouse take care of their partner and you're like, oh, that's what it is. I get it now. You know what I mean? That's heavy. But.
And I'm sure there's days where they're like anyone would, I don't want to do this anymore. This is so hard. And then imagine the guilt after that.
Oh my God. Yep.
Oh my gosh.
Yeah.
And that's something I've always been a huge proponent of mental health things, just personally, but coming here and seeing the different levels through caregivers for our patients, through caregivers for our medical field, we know we've seen things recently that health professionals, nurses are going through with, in hospital settings and things like that.
Yeah.
But just the level of need for mental health support for not just the people, but the workers is just huge.
Yeah.
There always has to be a light on that.
For all of us.
Yeah.
Just all of us in general.
Oh, what? I thought you could just compartmentalize and just put it in the back of your brain and everything will be just fine. I'm just going to have a few glasses of scotch, a couple cases of beer every day, and just put it all back there.
Yeah, it'll be fine.
And it's going to totally be fine.
Yes.
Yep.
Other than that, you'd mentioned earlier, Katie, like the hospice caregiver TikTok world. What other types of support what other types of support is out there for people that work in your field?
So I think that is, like, for me, social media is a big one because it's people that 100% you don't have to explain the struggles to. They automatically just know them.
They get you.
Yes.
Yeah, for real.
Yeah.
Like for our staff though, like having that external resource to allow them that space to talk about those things if they need to is a big one. And also the camaraderie again, like I don't want to be redundant, but like leaning on the people that it's like a veteran situation. And I don't mean to like keep comparing the two, but like you are the only one that understands your experience, that understands their experience too. Right. So the connection for me with other people that are in it is like incredibly valuable.
Yeah.
For not having to, because like Fawn said, when she was entering this field, people outside of this field don't get it. My mom has been a nurse for 38 years. And there are times where I'm like, do you know what I do for a living?
Right.
Like, do you? Yeah. Because she's in a different field of nursing. Right. So, and there's nothing that I hate more than having to like feel bad about something and then fully explain why I feel bad about it.
Right.
Like there are when you have the connection with the people that you do, it's like, I get you. That's huge.
Because you can't bring that home.
No, you can't bring it home because it's
you can't put that burden on. You can't. You just have to talk with the people who know.
Well, yeah, and that's every group pretty much that goes through any sort of trauma or, like first responders, nurses, police officers, veterans. There's a very much like a common vein, I think, between a lot of us, especially if you've chosen such a selfless career.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? Where you're doing something so heavy. And like to the testament, I'm going to call her out, but I'm not going to call her business out because she asked me not to. One of your nurses, who was my mother's nurse for a super long time, her name was Olivia. And Olivia was amazing, and she's just a phenomenal person, but she saw me coming to visit my mom all the time, and her and I would talk, and then she learned a little bit about the nonprofit, what I was doing, because my mom and I would always talk about it, or my mom would talk to her about it. And then after my mom had passed, Olivia, being who she is, not knowing how that I'd become more involved with Uplifted Care. She didn't know I'd become a board member at the time. She has a business where she makes some food, and I'm not going to give any more information because I'm worried that she's going to get mad at me because she's going to get inundated with a bunch of asks for it. But she did a fundraiser for me and for my nonprofit organization, and then surprised me with a gigantic check for our organization. And she said that she did that because of everything that she learned from her time with my mother and I. And again, that's a testament to the type of people that work for your organization. Because I know plenty of other people that work for your organization that are the same type of people. You know what I mean? And it takes that type of person to be able to do that job because it's such a hard job. So it's just to be able to have that is so important, I think.
Yes, that the most selfless people that care about filling everyone else's cup instead of their own. And you have to be like, listen.
Right.
Fill it up.
Take time
Fill it up.
Yes.
Or you have nothing left to pour into anybody else.
Right.
Like it's the basic basic rule of self-care, but it's so true.
Because if you're so selfless, it's hard for you to do things for yourself. And it's so easy for you to feel guilty about doing something for yourself.
Exactly.
So when you start to do something for yourself, if anybody says anything to make you even sort of feel guilty, it turns into this giant avalanche that's just like, I'm never going to go do that again now for myself. Ever.
Never. I'm never looking at the corn in my car again.
Yeah. And that's why you have to be so supportive, like whatever it is. If it's driving and looking at the cornfields, if it's going to get your nails done, if it's working out, whatever your thing is, go do that thing. You know what I mean? I think it's super important. Other than that, is there anything else that you both wanted to share about Uplifted Care? Any events, anything like that that's on the top of your mind that you wanted to say?
I don't know. I mean, we have a lot of different things coming up at the Grief Center. A lot of bereavement events that people can memorialize their loved one. So those are coming throughout the year. They can find information on those on our Facebook page.
And your Facebook page for Uplifted Care.
Yeah, okay. And our website. But I mean, other than that, I mean, staying connected with us through that is like the best way to find information. And also people really utilizing our website to get more information. Like I will not order a pizza if I have to pick up the phone and do it.
Yeah, I'm getting to that point.
So like I understand people, and especially with the nature of our work, I understand like our website is the greatest place for that. There's a whole bunch of frequently asked questions, things like that. So always use that as a resource because you're going to go there before you actually have the courage to pick up the phone.
Yeah.
So I think that's a really underutilized, and we're not mean people.
Yeah.
So call and ask to talk to any one of us.
Yeah.
I mean, and also, Fawn, I just want to let you know if Eric ever wants to take you out to Dairy Queen, he's quitting the board. I just want you to know.
Yes.
Just be very cautious about that.
We're going to go to a very scenic area.
Yeah. Then I'm gonna squish your hopes and dreams.
No, I gotta tell you something.
Yeah.
Like,
I'm sorry.
It's not happening today.
No ice cream with you.
The last time I did that with my wife, the second we pulled into the park, she like looked at me and she knew something was coming. So I'm like, I'm sorry. I don't know how else to tell bad news. This is how I tell bad news.
It just tells itself now. Yeah. That's what I would say. If you aren't sure, just call. And it's one of those things where you don't know when you're going to need it, I think, until you're in it.
Right.
And it's not something you're going to think of all the time or every day. There's so many more misconceptions we didn't name, and there's a lot of overlapping between palliative care and hospice care, and what does this mean? And like we continue to say, we didn't know anything really about this until we joined the organization. So
nothing. So
no question is
stupid.
Yeah. Yes. And if you just need more information, just call us.
And
most of us has been through it.
Yeah. Start having these conversations at home. Like and my family doesn't completely hate me anymore, but I mean, we started having them like Easter. Let's talk about advance directives. Well, what are your wishes? I found out there's people in my family that want to be cremated that I would have buried.
Right.
Like, what?
How do you know if you don't talk about it?
That is huge.
Yes.
That is huge. I think that's one thing to make sure we mention is it's so like relieving for families that are left to make these hard decisions, and the decisions have already been made.
Yes.
It's so difficult to even think of talking about that when nothing is wrong, but that's the time to do it.
Yes.
Right. You are just gifting your daughter, loved one, whomever is going to be there for you when you can no longer speak. They don't even have to question what you want. They don't have to be left with that thought of, did I do the right thing? Did I not? Like, I know very much my dad does not want anything done. Me, I would have been like, I need to invite everybody. I need everyone to come pay their respects to him. Right. He did so much for so many people. Right. But now I know, So.
Yeah. And how important is that? That's insanely important. And you have to talk about that stuff. And you don't think it's important until you have to bury a loved one. Mm-hmm. And then you're like, okay, I need to get my will done tomorrow. I need to get all this stuff done, because it's the act of losing somebody that you love is exhausting enough in and of itself.
Hard enough.
Much less, okay, now you got to do all this paperwork. You got to figure this out and do this and call this person. And we're going to do the cremation. You got to talk to the priest and we got to pick out flower. And you're like, I don't want to do anything. I want to crawl into a hole for like a week and not deal with any of this stuff. Yeah. But having that already done and having those conversations, those hard to have conversations now when it's not hard to have them, I think is a huge gift that a lot of people don't utilize enough.
Of control. Yeah. It gives you control in a situation.
Yeah. And what was the phone number to call?
815-939-4141.
Okay, so we'll list that.
One number.
Perfect. And we'll list that in the website, in the comments. And other than that, is there anything else you guys wanted to mention?
No, I don't think so. This was so great. Thank you so much for the opportunity and making it painless.
Yeah. I appreciate it.
For joining our board.
For real.
Absolutely. I really don't feel like I'm doing much stuff, but I appreciate it.
When you spoke to our staff, talk about filling their cups up, when we hear those testimonials from loved ones of how we were able to help, we always feel like we try to do our best and we do a good job. But to hear that, I can't tell you how many staff members afterwards were like, so fulfilled after hearing that.
I'm very thankful for that because again, in the work that you do, and I understand it a bit to the effect of like what I do is I work in the crisis space for veterans and I work with a lot of homeless veterans all the time. And like you have those moments when if that's your day to day, you get into these ruts where sometimes you're just like, what am I doing?
Right.
Like, am I doing anything? Am I doing good? Like what am I accomplishing? And if you're that selfless to have that type of life, to have that type of career, like you just every once in a while, you just need somebody to be like, thank you so much for doing this. And you're like, okay, cool. I can keep doing this for a while. You just need that reminder. So I was very happy that I was able to give that reminder to the staff and I'm happy to do that anytime. So
I can't even tell you the impact, the impact stuff like that has on them and us.
I mean,
wasn't a dry eye in the house.
Yeah. Well, I appreciate that very much. And I was really happy to do that. I love being a part of everything that you guys do. And I'm always going to be very thankful for that. So thank you guys. And thank you guys again for willing to be on here today. And I'm glad that we made it painless. And I miss Brad. But
we do too.
That's okay.
We wanted the fresh meat.
I know.
You have a connection. He didn't. We were ready to get him with some hospice trivia or something.
Oh, yeah. And he would have loved it. Like I said, because of the experience that he had with his father. But either way, I think he's fine because he's skiing and having a great time while we're in Illinois. So I'm sure he'll be fine.
Yeah.
But thank you both again. I can't thank you guys enough. And for our listeners out there, thank you again for listening to today's episode. Please, if you have a story of your own experience with hospice care or how it's affected you, please feel free to share it. You can check us out on our Facebook page or on the projectheadspaceandtiming.org website. But other than that, until next time, we hope that we helped you go from being freaked out, insecure, neurotic, and emotional to truly being fine about redefining hospice care.